Welcome to the Worldwise Wealth Podcast. I'm your host, Nicole, and this podcast is your guide to building a truly borderless life. From entrepreneurship, investment migration, tax optimization, and everything in between, this show highlights the nuances of a global citizen lifestyle. Let's dive in. In today's episode, I sit down with Hayley. Now, Hayley is the founder of a platform called Bubbl, which is really a revolutionary platform for travelers, digital nomads, and global citizens alike. So not only do we dive into Bubbl and the amazing functions and capabilities that it has for global citizens, but of course, we also dive into her past experience working for some of the largest companies globally, what she learned from those experiences, and how she transitioned that work experience over to entrepreneurship and starting her own business from that. So let's dive into today's episode.
My name's Hayley. I'm from Australia. Grew up in Australia, born and bred. I spent my career traveling around the world. I traveled from Australia actually, I went to college in Australia, and then I kind of retired after I left college for 2 years. You guys call that digital nomading now, but in my day, it was sort of like, ski bumming around the world. So I did that for 2.5 years, which is quite long for most people. Went back to Australia for a few years, worked in industry, had some really interesting experiences working for people like Richard Branson from Virgin. Then I decided to take my passport, head over to Europe, like a lot of Aussies do. Went over to Europe, worked there for some time, and then I moved over to the US. So I bounced straight from Australia to the US. When I was really younger, I also did a bit of work in Japan. So that was an interesting experience. I've been in the US for like 12 years. And before I went to the US, I started my first travel company, which is called Total Heliski. I'm a big ski nut. So I was like, okay, why not build a travel company around skiing? Did that, still have that business operating actually. And then I founded my second business, the one I've just launched called Bubbl, after about, 10, almost actually 12 years here. And we'll get into it, but the story behind Bubbl was really under my nose for about 6 years before I concepted it. So I was working in industry as a tech executive in big companies and in startups. And then eventually I jumped ship, left Uber, where I was working last, to come and do this.
So I'm curious, you have worked with, in the past, some very big brands. Uber, I'm sure you can name a few more if you would like to. But how did a background in that, how did you find the background in working for a lot of these larger tech companies transitioned you into your own journey for entrepreneurship and creating your own products?
Yeah, so I worked for Virgin. I mean, Virgin was very influential earlier in my career because that was like they really know how to build a brand. They really understand how to like engage, build a community, get people on board, net promoter score. So that was really exciting what I did at Virgin. And it was only for 2 years, but it had a profound impact on me and how I built my heliski business and then now how I'm building Bubbl. So the authenticity of the brand, etc. And honestly, the fun. Like actually, I think people really levitate towards things that are fun. So I just try to make all my brands fun, just like Virgin does. So the Virgin piece was like very easy to translate. Some of the other companies I worked at, Nokia was one of them. The interesting thing about Nokia, when I was at Nokia, it was, technology companies are all about ecosystem. They're all about, building your ecosystem of partners, making sure that everyone's winning. And so when I built my first ski company, the Total Heliski, the idea that I decided to do with that was I wanted to build an ecosystem, like a partner network of heliski operations. I could have just gone and repped one or two, but I decided to build like a network because I decided that the offering to the customer was going to be better if I could represent, operations across the world, and if I could really showcase like the comparison between the different places. So Nokia kind of influenced me there, like how to build an ecosystem, not just an ecosystem of the heliski operators, but, incorporating brands and athletes. And I ran some programs. I ran the world's first heliski travel show event, which was in London, which was, showcasing and getting all the operators and athletes there and turning it into a content business. Because at Nokia, I was working in the content space. So that's a Nokia influence. And then, of course, I moved here. When I moved here, I worked for brands like Intel, and I worked for Uber, and I worked for some wearable companies doing fun wearable like athletic apps and things. I think the Intel experience, let me try and think about how Intel helped me influence it. They're kind of a boring silicon company. So maybe Intel pushed me into running my ski houses for more interest. Like I really had, my day job at Intel was running strategic partnerships. So, negotiating contracts and, setting up gives gets and things for partnerships. So I think, there was an influence there, but there was less direct than, say, when I went to Uber. Uber is obviously, one of the world's most famous marketplace companies. And so I'm building a marketplace effectively. And so I really wanted to learn about, how do marketplaces work, what matters, liquidity, network effects, all of these, optimization, and then the legalities around like, how do you build, so with Uber's case, how do you build a trust and safety layer? How do you become that trusted platform? So I learned actually a lot at Uber, even though I was only there for a year. And I was doing the autonomous vehicle partnerships and some rent. I was managing business development for their rent business. I learned a lot about, the trust and safety layer, optimization. I mean, it was a packed a punch in a short time that I have applied to what I'm building today.
Really interesting to hear, just very briefly, but to hear some of the core insights from working with some of these most well-recognized, well-known brands in the globe. So talk to us, I guess, about your first business. How did that start? That's incorporated with travel, it sounds like. So how did that start, and what did the beginning pieces of starting something of your own look like? I mean, how did you even know where to start?
Okay, so the true story is I was like a bit over 30 and I was looking at like doing an MBA because everyone's like, oh, you got to do an MBA. And then I was looking at, oh, should I go to INSEAD? Because, like academically, I taught my university in Australia. I'm like, I guess everyone goes and does MBAs. However, I had an underlying business degree. So, like, MBAs are good for people who are like engineers. They want to get a business backbone. At least in Europe, they're kind of free. I think they're free if you're a European citizen. But over here, they cost a lot of money. And so I didn't look to do it here. At that time, I was still there. But then I like started studying for the test. I'm like, shit, this is boring and I hate it. And one of my friends who went to INSEAD, he goes, well, if you hate doing the GMAT test, I think it's called, then why are you doing an MBA? Because like you hate study. Like, why do that? Just go and start a business. So I took that advice and I was like, yeah, why do that? Just go and start a business. And it was not natural to me to do that. No one in my family was entrepreneurial. Like no one even in my extended family, cousins, aunts, uncles, my parents, my mom's a teacher. My dad is an engineer. So no one in my family like really had that DNA. My sister's a doctor, right? So I didn't have that. So what I ended up doing was trying to think for about a year, like what business could I do? What business might I like? Now, my passion was skiing. Really, that was my big passion. And I had been, because I was earning good money at London, I had been spending some of my time going and exploring different heli ski operations. I was quite obsessed. In those days, my knees were better than they are today. And so what I did was I spoke to one operator in particularly. An operator is someone who runs the actual operation of the helicopters. And normally they sell independently. He'd come to me and said, well, you rep us in London. But then another one said the same thing. And I'm like, is there something in this? And so I realized too that like everyone I spoke to about this sport of helicopter skiing was very inaccessible. It was very mysterious. It was very unknown. Everyone thought you had to be an athlete or an expert and you jump out of a helicopter. There was all this mystique, which I thought was quite fun and cool because actually that's not how it works. And in fact, the truth is that a lot of like basically old cronies do it, people over 50, because that they're the ones who've got the money to do it, at least in the old days. But so I came up. So this is where, and the other thing is, I will tell you, Nicole, I did not know at that time how creative I was. I hope this be a lesson to everyone because, I was already in my 30s and people had not told me, like, I had not understood that I was creative because I was no good at music. At school, I was no good at art. Okay, so I didn't understand that I was creative until I created this brand called Total Heliski. And if you're a skier, you'll know where every day is a powder day is a very big deal. So with helicopter skiing, the essence, and this is where I'm really good at, I mean, I do have a marketing background, but with branding is like the ultimate is a powder day. So if every day can be a powder day with my company, then that's like the ultimate. So I started this kind of aspirational brand about helicopter skiing and bucket list and do your thing. Now, the interesting thing is, why would a girl from Australia who was not even like I wasn't even a racer. I did date a racer for 7 years. So and I did have a lot of days on skis and I lived and skied all over the place because that's what I wanted to do. Japan, French Alps, etc. But I definitely did not have the I didn't have the credibility to like start a heli travel company. So what I decided to do was build an authentic brand, which is what I'm doing with Bubbl today as well. I was like, okay, but what do I offer? And I'm like, I offer the fact that I'm female as well. I offer the fact that if I can do it, you can do it. If just this girl from Australia that just happens to be passionate about skiing, I mean, heck, by that stage I'd already had a knee reconstruction. In fact, in 2011 I had my second one. So I'd also been injured, and and actually the second injury I did helicopter skiing, but it wasn't really related to the skiing. It was just coincidental. So yeah, I built that brand around authenticity, like inspirational, aspirational. That's why I devised to have the world's first helicopter ski show for consumers in London. I got the athletes around the place who were really, everyone loves heli skiing in the industry. And, I was actually working at Nokia full time when I did this. So it was definitely beg, steal, and borrowing. I got sponsors. We got a hotel that was just opening with a helipad we were going to fly the athletes in. But the problem was the weather was bad on that day. But, so it was really cool. We got like the financial industry, all the bankers came, the Financial Times turned up. It was kind of cool. And it kind of like, I was sort of like, it almost burnt me out, to be honest, doing that. But what I realized was that there was this just innate like fascination with bucket list items and people wanting to do things and people feeling so trapped in maybe their everyday to day. And not, I know now like the YOLO, the you only live once thing is a more of a thing, but I feel like, and I think that's since COVID, but I think before COVID, when people were like, fighting to get up the corporate ladder, and it's funny, Nicole, I was never someone who really was fighting to get up the corporate ladder. I don't kiss ass. That's probably why I wasn't a VP in a corporate company. I don't kiss ass. I just don't. So what I do is build brands and build inspiring experiences for people. I think that's what that company was about. And then when I moved here, although I didn't do it through a company, the ski houses that I ran, which we can talk about, which led to the inspiration for Bubbl, that was the same thing. I facilitated and enabled people, everyday people, to like live a great life, live out their dreams, to go skiing all the time. And just, that's kind of like more the essence of me, not to kiss ass and climb the corporate ladder, because it didn't work for me, obviously.
And before diving into Bubbl and building what you are building now, I want to hone in a little bit on the aspect of branding your business and how that really, it sounds like, launched your business. Do you have any tips, tricks, hacks? Like, it sounds like you really understand the importance of this more than just like a brand board. I think that's what a lot of people think of when they think of a brand. So, can you dive into this a little bit further and how that really propelled your business forward?
Yeah, and so at university, I went to UNSW. I did a Bachelor of Commerce. I majored in marketing. In fact, I was on a scholarship for marketing, so I was actually being paid like a sandwich thing. I was being paid to go to and work with brands. And I did an internship at a FMCG company, fast moving package consumer packaged goods company, with brand managers. So, and then I worked for an airline. I mean, I've worked a lot of places. I topped brand management. Funny that. But to me, it was common sense. Brands. So here's the thing. I've worked in tech a very long time, especially companies like Intel. They just think that it happens. I mean, Intel, I'm going to say about Intel for a second because it was very interesting. That place was full of electrical engineers, really smart people who didn't understand branding. Branding is about people. People buy things, not things. Things don't buy things, at least AI until AI takes over, but people buy things. People are people, and people have psychology, and brand and marketing is psychology. In fact, there's a topic we did at uni called consumer behavior. So it is my firm belief that marketing works, advertising works. And the reason it works is because it appeals to people's emotions and it appeals to their decision making. And so when I go about and create a brand, this is where I was telling you before, like I didn't realize I was so creative. I obviously was. When I worked on Total Heliski, I realized like I was getting under the skin of people, like their dreams and their desires. And by asking every day is a powder day, hello, God, wouldn't that be good if I could go somewhere and every day is a powder day? So fast forward to Bubbl, and I think, and your question about what advice, what I learned from Virgin is about authenticity. I learned about building a brand that reflects you and your values. And I mean, I honestly, when they look at brands in Silicon Valley and investors, and and they say we invest in the founder. I was watching Ashton Kutcher was on stage at TechCrunch the other day, and he was like going, "Yeah, I didn't even see the deck. I didn't even know what the Uber deck or the Airbnb deck looked like. I can't even remember. It was all about the founder." And so I really think for me, because I'm such a passionate person, I'm really energetic, as you can tell. I get told that all the time. Like for me, I couldn't do Bubbl unless I was really, really invested in the idea of what I'm building. So that's the first thing. Don't go and build something unless you're not really invested. I've got friends who run like cybersecurity companies, and I know that they're doing something really, really good for the world, but I sort of think, God, it is so boring. So I'm really lucky that I've got a topic that I find super interesting with travel. But the second thing is like, so with Bubbl, and full disclosure, like things that influenced Bubbl were Virgin, Burning Man. So I'm building a company based on values and principles that I think make this product work. And this product being this shared facilitation of this shared travel experience, which in most cases might involve accommodation. So Bubbl is a bubble. And I invented this whole thing called a bubble because I realized that when you go and stay in a bubble, it's not just the place, it's actually more the group and the experience that you're all having together and the stay. So there's three things that make up a bubble. When people say to me, well, can't Airbnb do this? And what's on Airbnb? And I say, yeah, Airbnb is a great place to stay, but Bubbl is a great place to have this experience. And so, it doesn't matter to me that experiences are trendy now and all this, and, young people are not buying things, because I've been doing that for years. I've been acting like that for years. I've been spending my money on travel and experiences my whole life, my whole entire life. So for me, it was just a very innate thing, like to build a company that facilitates people to make really great connections and to have a really good time and like live their life to the full. And I might add, facilitate people like me to I guess have these experiences and sometimes hustle and pay for them through the value that they add. So there's a very big piece of my platform, which we can get into later, but about value to contribution. And part of this is because when I was at Intel, I suffered a personal kind of legal problem situation over a remodel that went wrong. And as a result, I didn't have a lot of cash spare to, even though I had a job at Intel, to go and like, be in a ski house. So I decided to run one so I could subsidize it myself. And so I decided to put in my work to be able to achieve the same lifestyle I wanted to keep, if that makes sense. And actually, that Bubbl enables that too for people.
It's really interesting to hear your insights having been in so many global brands and what you have learned, and then hearing how you've brought that into your own brand. So let's talk about Bubbl, if you don't mind sharing a little bit about what Bubbl is. And I'm also curious what you saw missing from the market potentially in order to fill the need that Bubbl is now filling.
Yeah.
Are you looking to become a diversified global citizen? If this is a lifestyle that you're seeking to create, we can help. Whether it be multiple residencies, citizenships, bank accounts, trusts, or company formations, we operate in 30 plus of the most tax-friendly jurisdictions around the globe to get you structured properly. Head to the link in the show notes to learn more and to get your global citizen journey underway today.
Yeah. So what's cool about Bubbl is that it was sort of, I think it's sort of cool, but also annoying to me that like it was under my nose for 6 years before I realized. So let me just back up here that I moved to the US in order to build a startup. That was my intention. I was like, mobile's big. I've got a lot of tech experience at Motorola and, Virgin Mobile, because that was actually sort of tech as well. And I was like, wanting to be part of it, and it took me a little while to get my mojo. I ended up going to Intel to do augmented reality, which is kind of was a fun new thing as well. So, but when the augmented reality thing at Intel fell through, because they just didn't know what they were doing, to be honest. But when that fell through, I was like, okay, what do I do next? And I could have left, but I didn't have the idea, and that was I also didn't have the work visa. That was the other thing, but that could be got around. But so I decided to just keep on like working and doing everything. And so I was running these houses because one year I couldn't find one to join in the area I wanted to go to. And a girl I knew said, well, you run a heliski business. Why don't you just, everyone in town, why don't you just like start one? And I looked on Craigslist and sure enough, a house came up and I got the house and the rest is history. I ran them for 8 years. And every year there's no instruction booklet on how to do this thing. There was just a format whereby for 50 years people have been sharing houses to go on ski trips, like people get together for a winter. Someone has to sign the lease with the owner, and then they rent the house, and it's like a pop-up community. And what I realized was a couple of things. One, that I met all of my friends I still have today through those houses. Mostly it was a very formative thing, and that there's a lot of people that move to the Bay Area. It's a very transient type of place. People move from the East Coast, and a lot of them, if they, especially if they like skiing, or even if they don't but they want to get into it, or they just want to meet people, a lot of them join these houses because it's fun. It's kind of the equivalent of the the New York Hamptons house, except it goes over the winter and it works a certain way here. So for me, it was like my whole social life opened up because I'm such a big skier, and it also allowed me to like inexpensively, pretend that I had a second house for the season. It was amazing. I'm like, if I'd known this, I might have moved to the US 5 years earlier, honestly, except that would have been, the financial crisis. But so this idea that people can be part of a group, make new friends. And the other thing is that, like, so over the years, I was in Palisades Ski Resort, which is the old name for Squaw Valley. That's a really like prime destination, this valley I was in, and my houses were there, and I wanted to keep houses in that valley. And what I realized is that like wealthy, like people like doctors and software company owners who could afford to get hotels every weekend wanted to be in the ski house because you get a bigger, better kind of place with living area, and you get a social life. You get people to hang out with. You can still have your own private room and bathroom. We had a mix of bunk rooms and private room. You had to like take your fair share. There's all these principles about sharing, and and on the whole, all you had to do is really keep this common areas tidy and keep your room tidy. And we had cleaners come in once a month, and there was a system. But over time, I realized that like there were some things missing. Organizational tools. It was a shit show to organize. It was very complicated, especially the bigger the house. I had one house with 8 bedrooms. That means you have to have a lot of members. It exponentially increased. And there really weren't any tools to do it. I had to use Google Sheets. I had to use WhatsApp. I had to use Venmo, PayPal. Wait, how did this person pay me? Did this person pay? Is this person's friend coming? I mean, it was a nightmare. The expenses. So, kind of over time, I didn't think anything of it because I thought, it didn't occur to me that this could be a thing until and this is like literally how I discovered the idea. I was driving to Lake Tahoe. It was a snowy night. I was on my own. It was a Thursday. It was like 9 p.m., dark, wintry, February night. And I'm listening to Sarah Blakely. She's the founder of Spanx on her podcast, a podcast about her. And I don't know what happened, but she says something and she goes, if you've got an idea, you've just really got to go for it. And I'm like, I don't know what happened. Like the neurons clicked. And I went, wait, could these ski lease things be a bigger idea? Because it had crossed my mind before, but I thought, but it's such a small industry, it's such a small thing. It's only a few people doing it, in these areas. But then I just thought bigger when she said that. I went, hang on, could it be that like there's more occasions and like are people like sharing places already? And like, what do they do? And I knew, and I'd been invited on things, and there were WhatsApp groups, and like, oh, I'm getting a house, and does anyone know a friend of friends? You can bring friends of friends, because there was no platform to find people to like fill these houses for whatever the reason was. And that's when I had the aha moment, and I started thinking. So I went to bed that night. This was in 2021, right after the vaccine had been found. I was actually running a house during COVID. We can talk about the liability issues later. But so that liability is an issue too, which I've solved with Bubbl. But so I woke up the next morning and I'm like, Bubbl. It's going to be called Bubbl. And I don't know how, but Bubbl, and I got Bubbl without the E because I actually kind of like now Bubbl without the E. It's kind of cooler. And that was because at that time, like everyone knew what I'm like, this is a brand that the whole world's going to know because everyone was in their COVID bubble. So it's kind of a play, and not a piss take, but kind of like a play on COVID, almost like an anti-COVID kind of like brand name, that I wanted to make fun. I wanted to turn a bubble into a thing because I was running my ski houses, and I was running bubbles with strict COVID protocols. Everyone had to have been vaccinated, but the bubble saved everyone's sanity. The bubble literally was saving people's sanity that year. People were going up there, and it was weird at the ski resort. No restaurants were open that year, but people just got to ski and be outdoors and hot tub with each other and just got to socialize. And I just realized the huge immense value. And I was giving these people much more than just their money's worth. I was giving them an outlet. And so I forget the question now. Did I answer the question? Um,
Yeah, yeah, you did. I was curious what it looks like, like, what was the gap in the market that you
oh, that
saw
in the market.
Bubble could
Yeah,
fill? And so, I mean, that's very
yeah,
interesting, and I know a lot of businesses were born of a need during COVID, and so I like that it
yeah.
was not only a need during COVID, but it's something that can also transition out of that period and is beneficial indefinitely.
Well, just to add to that, so the gap was I started then incubating, and I did this for 2 years. I was at Intel when I got that aha moment. I then went to Uber intentionally because I wanted to get marketplace experience, right? But the gap to me, so I started incubating. I started asking people about group travel, like or solo travel, like they're kind of related, like group travel, solo travel. Like how do you travel? And I knew this myself because I had been a nomad. I had been one of these people working in London where you get all these holidays all the time and you've got, God, it's Easter in 2 weeks. Shit, I've not organized anything. What can I do? And I knew I was one of those solo travelers that, in the day, it was always hard to find people. You either go on your own, you book a tour, you don't go at all, you see what your friends are doing. Usually your friends are coupled up or they're busy or whatever. So you have to go on a tour or not go at all or go on your own. So now there's Bubble. Now there's Bubble. You can see what other people are doing that are single. And the gap, and just on the gap too, because I thought, so here's my feeling about the gap. Bubble is a place where you can connect, find, and actually book a spot in someone's trip. So I've intentionally made Bubble to be like dare I say like a booking platform or joining platform. That doesn't mean that you have to have a trip where people pay through the app. They might have to pay on their own, but it is a place where you're posting real trips, and you've got real organizers. Because what I know from running a Bubble, running my lease, is that there has to be one, but the buck stops with someone. Because when you have, I mean, you can have kind of group trips, and on Bubble, very much you can organize a college reunion, you can organize a wedding, as in if people want to do bubbles for weddings, you can organize 40th birthday party, any group trip you can organize on Bubble. And what Bubble wants to do is make it easy. There are really no, or there's a few popping up, but there's not really any tools end to end to seamlessly manage and organize schedules, what people are going to be doing, where they're going to be staying, what room they're going to take, who's turning up when, who's doing what. There's no real apps that do that until now. A chat, like how are we going to communicate in one? So Bubble's an all in one. So there was that organization piece, and then there was that find and discover piece. I could have just built the organization piece, but I felt there was a huge market need for people to extend their community and extend, now with like social media, like everyone's meeting on dating apps, right? But everyone's sick of dating apps. I met my husband in a bubble. I met my husband in a share house, in summer share house in 2022 or 2021. I forget what year. And we met we actually beat the dating apps because he found me on Bumble later. We beat the dating app. I met him in the kitchen very authentically. And it was like just funny that like that's many people have met during my bubbles, my houses. So just this idea that people want connection. And when we did our wait list and said to people, why are you joining Bubble? 80% plus said they're joining to meet new people and meet them authentically, which goes back to our values.
And I don't want to mention names, but I know that it's very popular in the creator space in the last couple of years to host group trips. And so it sounds like this is an interesting alternative to host groups trips to get people in. It sounds like there's a chat feature. Everything is integrated in one. How does it work in terms of liability and insurance? Is that something that you offer? Is that something that every person needs additionally? What does that look like?
Yeah. So firstly, yes, absolutely for creators. So when you come to Bubble and you bubble your trip, so it's a bit like Eventbrite. Eventbrite, like you go and get the venue wherever you get it, you bring it to Eventbrite, and then you sell the tickets, right? That's what you do. So I thought about Bubble the same way because I didn't want to like reinvent. Why would I reinvent, Airbnb or VRBO? I want to partner with them one day. So the idea was like, hey, creators can come to the platform and they can create a trip. We don't know what you paid for the accommodation or what, because if you come there and you create like a blockchain workshop, I mean, the sky is the limit. We talk about it being your passport to infinite travel possibilities, but also infinite creator possibilities. So you might be a yoga teacher who we've got on the platform right now who's running trips to Pakistan. He loves Pakistan. That's it. He loves like these remote exotic experiences, because he's a yoga teacher, it's very spiritual, going to like the Karakoram. So that might be your angle. You might be like a blockchain expert and you want to like run a house for the consensus conference, and you might want to build your personal brand. So we've built Bubble across events, vacations. You might be a kiteboard instructor and you want to go and run, a kiteboarding clinic in Greece. or something. So think about anything. We've got a bunch of categories. You might be a chef, and you might want to host a Bubbl for the Aspen Food and Wine Festival. And you might be able to get these people into some sort of, you might be able to cook for them, but get them into some special stuff because you know a lot of people. So I really want to, the sky's the limit, and I'm excited to see what people are going to build on Bubbl. So that's the first thing. Liability. So when someone organizes anything right now, the liability is always on, most of it is on the organizer, because the organizer controls the experience. So what I did with Bubbl, that's not really fair. Like, it's not really fair, especially if you have people come in and they're irresponsible. So what we did is we created a platform whereby liability is shared between the group. And that's because obviously where there is negligence, negligence will be unfound. But basically, liability is shared between the group, and you are building a relationship. We're a tech platform that kind of enables this. So this is a relationship between the leaders and the travelers. And so this is like kind of like a contract between you two, but it's not an uneven one, which is what it would be normally. Now, for insurance, there's two types of insurance. There's obviously travel insurance if someone can or can't go. We are going to be launching that soon. Travel insurance will be a great option for group travel because it means that someone who joins, you don't want to let the others down. They can get sort of their money back if they have circumstances. So that's going to be an easy no-brainer. That's what you pay extra for. Bubbl Wrap liability insurance. So, Airbnb have air cover. We are planning to launch Bubbl Wrap insurance. Many insurances, the homeowner has insurance, so that whoever, like if there's a property involved or a hotel, they have their own insurance. But there is a gap in insurance around like the third party, not to get too technical, but there is a gap right now that exists with between roommates with third party property and liability, property and personal injury. And I plan on closing that gap with our insurance product that we're going to build. And it'll be called Bubbl Wrap because, of course, fun name, just like everything else.
I appreciate you sharing that because I think that gives a lot of people listening as well some insight on how that works in the back end. I am curious, and you speak, I mean, this sounds like a very interesting platform. I was checking it out beforehand. I'm going to check it out in some more detail after this. How do people typically come to you and find Bubbl?
So we're new. We're a month old. Don't know if you knew that. Like, we started this year. We started building in January. We ran some proof of concepts over the course of the year with Coachella. We chose events because you can really create network effects around events. So Coachella, South by Southwest, Lollapalooza, and that's where we found. And we did a lot of market research on the go. So we found these people who are traveling solo and wanted other people to travel with. They were kind of fairly easy to find. So obviously, one way we're going to grow is through partnerships. We need to grow through people joining Bubbl, creating bubbles, creating like their private bubbles, their 40th birthday party, and inviting all their friends. I mean, there's no question we are a company that needs to grow through our community. Our goal is to build a global community of socially responsible travelers. So to that end, what we're doing, and I'll just tell you this because it fits to how we find people. So you join Bubbl, and if you want to participate in a Bubbl, you need to do ID checking. You can be on Bubbl without the ID check, but if you want to actually go in and be in a Bubbl, we've got a user profile, a section for you to just like, my travel. It's like a traveler profile kind of thing. You can talk about where you live and where you're from, or if you're a digital nomad, you can specify that. You can put your social links. You can put where you want to go next. So you can we're going to be like enabling people to like find other people through like where they want to go next, that sort of thing. And so where we're finding people is honestly the Facebook groups. We're finding them in Reddit. Like, we're finding them in places where they are today, because today people generally are on these platforms because there is no real place like Bubbl. And these platforms that they're on, they can't really, like, you post something and it then gets buried in the whole, like, you do a post and then it'll get buried because how do you find it? I mean, some platforms have hashtags, but not many of them. So what we've done with Bubbl is created like this, this listing idea. So it can be found and filtered, and, people can find you by that. So in terms of how we're finding customers, partnerships with communities, advertising, social media, and building our own online communities. We're going to be looking at events. We're going to be looking at the winter. So winter ski trips, my background in my heli ski business are interesting because, ski trips are expensive. I'm not talking just about ski leases. I'm talking about, like, say, you want to go for a week here, a week there. They're kind of expensive, and you sometimes have people to go with, but you don't always, because there's a lot of people whose like wife doesn't ski or kids, don't ski, and so those people, at the moment they're posting on Facebook. We're looking at doing partnerships with resorts, partnerships with brands, and partnerships with event producers. We're doing one for Art Miami right now. We've got like 800 bubbles that are going to be built for Art Miami with one of these event producers. So he's kind of like creating the bubbles, and he's like having the people come from his audience that come. He's using us because of the tools we have, right? The tools that we give him a lot of efficiency. So yeah, it is a expensive exercise to try and find people, you know, because it's a consumer company.
Well, thank you for sharing everything that you have shared today about the business and also about your beginnings and how that looked for you starting an entrepreneurship and building multiple businesses. Where can people find Bubbl online?
Yeah, so they go to bubble.co. We don't have an app right now, like a mobile app. We will be bringing out a mobile app over the winter. But they go to bubble.co, which is bubbl.co. On that page, you can see there's a page for leaders. If you want to look into how do you become a leader, how you become a traveler, you simply sign up, take a look around, post a trip. One important thing to notice is that you can post your trip privately. So we have a whole bunch of trips on Bubbl that are private, because I'm going to that 40th birthday party, or I'm running it, and like I don't want to invite other people to that, right? So that what you see is the public bubbles, but you can just, there's a toggle. You just put, this is a private bubble, and at the end, once we approve it, you'll get the link, and you just share that with your friends or your social media, and you use Bubbl for the tools. So it's really easy to start a trip on Bubbl, and it's really easy to kind of like create one and just join one as well. You join through contacting the leader. Bubbl's all about like curation, like the leader curates it. The leader manages, and the leader, puts it out there, like what kind of bubble this will be, and what kind of people will enjoy it. I'd love some of your listeners to try it and give us feedback, support at bubble.co, but they'll get some emails from us anyway if they join. Just one last thing. I think, like, my understanding is a lot of your audience, they're like, travelers and like digital nomads and people who are creating and traveling, and, like, I'd love to put it out there like a challenge. Like, think about how you could create, and maybe it's one trip a year. My heli ski trips, I used to run heli ski trips with my heli. I still do with my heli business. Last trip I ran with the US ski team guy come. But like, what could you create that adds to the world? What could you contribute to this community? Run a trip, subsidize it, you know, charge what you want, and what kind of a trip could you run that could really like build your personal brand and really like be a great time for other people? That would be what I'd love your listeners to think about.
Interesting. Yeah, it gets me thinking too. I've been thinking about that a little bit lately, so maybe this is a sign. And then if you are listening, and myself as well, bubble.co, bubble without the E.co. I was checking it out earlier. It looks really interesting. You already have quite, I mean, I didn't realize that you had launched so recently. You already have many trips, many bubbles up.
Yeah. Well, we work hard. Our team works really hard. It's and there's a lot of demand. I mean, I think there's a lot of pent up demand. So, yeah, we're excited to. We're fundraising right now. You asked me how I'm going to get users. Well, money is helps. So, if there's any interested investors out there, please reach out to me as well through Bubbl or through Hayley at bubble.co.
You've just listened to the Worldwise Wealth podcast. Visit our links in the show notes below or at worldwisecapital.com to learn more about how we can assist in your borderless diversification journey. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you in the next episode.